When Audrey Vance slipped the ring onto my finger, I saw Kamala Hayes' face turn ashen. The rare antique porcelain inkwell, possibly Ming dynasty, she had shattered 10 years ago, and the solemn, traditional marriage pact Grandpa George had signed in a rare, symbolic red ink. They were scars etched deep in my heart. She used to call me a country bumpkin. Now she was on her knees begging me. Seeing the Hayes family on the verge of bankruptcy, I wanted nothing more than for her to experience what it felt like to be trampled underfoot. When I received an invitation to Kamala Hayes' birthday party, Mr. Hayes had repeatedly pleaded with me to make an appearance. I figured nurturing our relationship was essential for a future marriage, so I agreed. I put on a respectable suit, prepared a modest gift, and took a cab to the venue. As soon as I entered, I saw Kamala Hayes dancing, one song after another, with a handsome, refined-looking man. I realized none of the Hayes family elders had arrived yet, so I found a corner to sit in and enjoyed the show. However, a few words from that young man caught me completely off guard, and what Kamala Hayes said just now made me very uncomfortable. My Sterling family in Sterling Harbor holds sway in both business and politics. Those in government hold high positions, and those in business are highly successful. As the sole heir, was I truly not good enough for Kamala Hayes? Was there some misunderstanding here? I pulled Kamala Hayes closer, wanting to clarify. Kamala Hayes, my Grandpa George and your Grandpa George were comrades in arms. Our marriage pact was set when we were children. Even though my parents passed away early, it doesn't mean I am not good enough for your Hayes family, does it? Everyone around us looked over, and Kamala Hayes' expression turned grim. But before Kamala Hayes could speak, that younger man pulled my hand away. He pointed at me, seething with anger. What era are we in? Are you still playing this arranged marriage game? Ethan Sterling, you came from the remote mountain community, carrying a tattered marriage pact. Isn't this just forcing a marriage? He called the solemn, traditional marriage pact, which Grandpa George had personally written, stroke by stroke, on a specially prepared, deep crimson parchment before he died, tattered. In my heart, it was the most precious thing. The young man's arrogant demeanor was rather irritating, but more than lashing out at him, I wanted to hear something sensible from Kamala Hayes. Kamala Hayes, hiding behind someone in a crisis doesn't show the true character of a Hayes. Perhaps my words were too blunt, as Kamala Hayes' face became incredibly displeased. Brandon Davis, stand behind me. Kamala Hayes waved Brandon Davis over, a hint of annoyance on her face. Ethan Sterling, if your Sterling family hadn't been indebted to mine, do you think you'd be standing here right now? Kamala Hayes pointed at the ground beneath my feet, her gaze dismissive and haughty. I had never seen Kamala Hayes like this. The Kamala I had known was always gentle and quiet. Now, it seemed it was just a facade she wore for her elders. I understood what Kamala Hayes meant. The rent for the venue of her birthday party alone was calculated by the minute. The decorations for the event, just the flowers, probably cost over $1 million. She was implying that my standing didn't match hers, or the Hayes family's, and that I didn't belong there. So, if given the chance, would you want to call off the marriage pact? When the conversation reached this point, I found it pointless. In the 10 years we had spent treating each other with polite respect, I thought that even if she didn't love me, she would at least understand the benefits of a strategic marriage, and I chose this marriage not just for alliance. My feelings for Kamala Hayes ran deeper than that. When I was 8, my parents died in a car accident, and only I was safely protected in their arms. But I stayed with their bodies for 3 days, watching them decompose little by little. After that, I developed severe psychological issues, and Grandpa George took me back to our hometown to recover. It was then that Kamala Hayes entered my world. 8-year-old Kamala took me wandering along the country lanes, secretly brought me to Riverton to see the Lantern Festival, and found new ways, every day, to cheer me up. When Grandpa George asked me if I liked her, of course I did. Later, Grandpa George and Kamala Hayes' Grandpa George drafted the marriage pact, and they returned to Riverton. Even as I grew up and my feelings weren't as intense, I still intended to follow through, but it seemed I was the only one who remembered all this. Kamala Hayes' dark pupils glinted with a cold light, and I watched her nod. Yes, I want to call off the marriage pact. The man standing beside her seemed to be giving Kamala Hayes courage, as he took her hand. Suddenly, the excited cheers around us intensified the atmosphere. My marriage pact with Kamala Hayes, which had lasted for 10 years, was nullified on her 28th birthday, but at that moment, she still didn't realize what this meant for the Hayes family. Kamala Hayes, you will regret this. By then, even if you put up the entire Hayes family, you won't get this opportunity back. I picked up the modest gift I had prepared and got ready to leave. I had no interest in watching this mess unfold further. My gaze drifted, and in the furthest corner of the room, I spotted a familiar figure, frowning in thought for a moment. I looked back again, our eyes met across the crowd, and that person smiled and raised a glass to me. Damn it, that rival of mine was here to watch the show. I glared at her, then turned to leave, but as soon as I took a step, the young man named Brandon Davis blocked my way. Who do you think you are, spouting such nonsense here? Anyone here, picked at random, has enough wealth to crush you. As Brandon Davis' words fell, the people around him burst into laughter. A few buddies also stood by his side, a country bumpkin just spouting off. Who gave you the nerve? Exactly. Look at the suit he's wearing, probably picked up from some street stall. The speaker's hand was rather crude. He reached out and flicked my lapel. Look at the gift box in his hand, wrapped in a tattered cloth. How embarrassing. I frowned, knitting my brows, and the anger in my heart became difficult to suppress, but I also feared causing a scene at the Hayes family's event, which would lead to even more complications later. Just as I was about to walk past, Kamala Hayes stood in front of me, her face pale with fury. Just go. I'm too ashamed to be associated with you. My lifted foot froze in that instant, and the laughter around me grew louder. Suddenly, my hand felt empty, and when I looked up again, I saw the box I was holding in Brandon Davis' hand. I'm going to see what kind of trash is in your cheap box. He grinningly pulled off the white and blue plaid cloth, threw it on the ground, and contemptuously stomped on it a few times. That cloth was woven by my grandmother herself when I was born, and my name was embroidered on it with a double-sided stitch. Oh, so this is the legendary marriage pact. Brandon Davis picked up the marriage pact and unfolded it. He held the specially prepared, deep crimson parchment between two fingers, his face full of disdain. I'll just tear this up, and then let's see how you force a marriage. Kamala Hayes, surprised, frowned with displeasure and turned to look at Brandon Davis. The next second, the marriage pact was torn into shreds. The marriage pact, personally inscribed by Grandpa George, was in tatters. At that moment, Brandon Davis' foot was on my grandmother's keepsake. This sight caused the rage in my mind to finally erupt. I shoved Kamala Hayes aside. I rushed to Brandon Davis, and slapped him across the face with the back of my hand. Asterisk smack. Asterisk. The entire hall fell silent. Brandon Davis clutched his face, stunned for a few seconds before he began to wail. You actually dared to hit me. Do you know who I am? How dare you hit me? I listened to his rambling and looked up at him. I already hit you. I don't care who you are. Brandon Davis' face twisted in anger. You are just jealous that Kamala Hayes loves me. That's why you hit me. But Kamala Hayes hates unrefined men like you the most. Kamala, I'm in so much pain. Blood was visible on Brandon Davis' fair face near his mouth. Kamala Hayes felt pangs of sympathy as she looked at the beloved man before her, and her eyes welled up too. Ethan Sterling, even if you hate me for breaking off the marriage, you shouldn't resort to violence. Apologize to Brandon Davis. Brandon Davis smoothly wrapped his arm around Kamala Hayes' waist, looking at me with a provocative smirk. The person who can make me apologize hasn't been born yet. I bent down to pick up the cloth on the ground, but the scattered pieces of specially prepared, deep crimson parchment seemed endless. I couldn't stand being in this place for another moment. I even wanted the Hayes family to disappear by tomorrow. Give it back. I was half a head taller than Brandon Davis, and I reached out to take the box from his hand. Inside this box was Grandpa George's keepsake, which I had originally intended to give to Kamala Hayes as a birthday gift, but now, it seemed she wasn't worthy. The next second, the box was in Kamala Hayes' hand. She held it high, her eyes filled with impatience and resentment. Apologize to Brandon Davis, or I'll smash what's in this box. Besides, what's in this box was meant for me anyway, wasn't it? Mr. Sterling. Kamala Hayes knew Brandon Davis was the one who provoked me first, yet she defended him. This was clearly intended to humiliate me. I took a deep breath, turned to the entrance behind me, and silently cursed the Hayes family elders, who were still late. Fine, Ms. Hayes, do as you please. I spread my hands, gathered the plaid cloth and the shredded red paper, and sat back in my original corner. Kamala Hayes' raised hand suddenly dropped. Her expression was somewhat crestfallen. In these 10 years, every time she saw this strange man, he always had an indifferent expression. Just now, It was the first time she had seen his emotions openly displayed. Even when she proposed breaking off the marriage, he remained just as unfazed. In that instant, she even wondered who was truly unwilling to go through with the engagement. While Kamala Hayes was momentarily stunned, Brandon Davis snatched the box from her hand. He smirked at me mockingly, and the next second, the box shattered. A round porcelain container rolled around, coming to rest at Kamala Hayes' feet. Asterisk clink, asterisk the lid of the round container broke. A vivid red ceremonial ink spilled out, a container of ceremonial ink. Kamala Hayes, your fiancé's gift is really modest, isn't it? I've never seen anyone give ceremonial ink as a gift. Kamala, it's a good thing you called off this marriage. Otherwise, you'd be a laughingstock for a year or two. The entire room erupted in laughter, and the mocking and sarcasm almost pierced my eardrums. Kamala Hayes stood there, silent, her beautiful eyes dimmed. She seemed to be scoffing at my cheapness too. I walked over and bent down to pick up the ceremonial ink. Kamala Hayes, do you really not remember this ceremonial ink? I finally asked the question. I wanted to know if she had truly forgotten, or was just pretending. Back when Grandpa George and Kamala Hayes' Grandpa George drafted the marriage pact, they took Kamala Hayes and me to a 70-year-old artisan to make a container of a special, artisanal ink reserved for momentous occasions. We had agreed that once we reached adulthood, we would use this ink to seal the marriage pact. Kamala Hayes frowned, a few images flashing through her mind, but she couldn't quite grasp them. Brandon Davis saw the flicker in Kamala Hayes' eyes, and his face hardened. He snatched the ceremonial ink from my hand, and smashed it fiercely on the ground again. It's just a broken container of ceremonial ink. How valuable could it be? The porcelain container shattered, and the bright red ceremonial ink on the white carpet was particularly jarring. Ethan Sterling, I'm telling you, I'm going to make you pay double for this punch today. He motioned to the men beside him, and two men rushed forward, each grabbing one of my arms, holding me up. The things in my hands once again scattered across the floor. I took a deep breath, my chest heavy and constricted. Brandon Davis, in his custom leather shoes, strode closer to me. Step by step, my gaze remained fixed on Kamala Hayes behind him. An unspeakable wave of disappointment and sadness washed over me, and my eyes stuck. I hadn't felt this emotion since I was 8 years old. Thanks to Kamala Hayes, I was experiencing it again now. Kamala Hayes, I'll ask you one more time, do you truly not remember this special, artisanal ink reserved for momentous occasions? Someone in the crowd rushed forward, kneeling to examine the ink mixed with fragments on the ground. Is this the legendary special, artisanal ink reserved for momentous occasions, said to be more precious than gold? And this porcelain container, is it actually blue and white porcelain from the Yuan dynasty? At these words, the entire hall fell silent. Blue and white porcelain from the Yuan dynasty was a priceless artifact. Even Brandon Davis, as unknowledgeable as he was somewhat dumbfounded. How could he possibly have blue and white porcelain from the Yuan dynasty and a special, artisanal ink reserved for momentous occasions? Brandon Davis, hurry up and do it. Are you going to let yourself get hit for nothing today? The two men holding me stood further back, and were even more incredulous. They repeatedly urged Brandon Davis to make his move. Brandon Davis turned to look at the mess on the ground, and also thought the person was bluffing. You are right. Who has ever seen blue and white porcelain from the Yuan dynasty? Just because some unknown person says it's real, it's real. Brandon Davis laughed wildly and defiantly, raising his hand as he walked towards me, but Kamala Hayes remained unmoved. It would be a lie to say I wasn't sad, especially since from the age of 8, I had always considered Kamala Hayes my future wife. Over these 10 years, I had sent countless valuable items to the Hayes family. Even the dress she was wearing had been delivered to the Hayes family by someone I sent. But now, with the marriage pact and ceremonial ink destroyed, there was no longer any compelling reason for us to be together. I was being held down, unable to even lift my head. Brandon Davis reached me, his fingers tightly pinching my chin, as if he wanted to draw blood. If you hadn't clung to Kamala Hayes, she and I would have been engaged ages ago. What makes you think you can just show up and steal her away? His raised fist was about to strike. I swiftly shifted backward, cleanly breaking free from the two men's grip. I kicked each of them, and the two men dropped to their knees. Brandon Davis stood frozen, not even seeing how I had escaped. This is so annoying. Kamala Hayes, your taste is really questionable. How could you fall for such a boisterous man? I glanced at Kamala Hayes. The woman in the dark grey mermaid dress looked presentable, but inwardly, she was lacking. She was nothing like the girl I knew as a child. I shook my head and turned to Brandon Davis. You also have terrible taste. Falling for such a woman. Kamala Hayes stood there, feeling as if those words had ripped open her world, leaving her, seething with anger that had nowhere to go. Ethan Sterling, I really dislike how you act like you don't need anything. You are the one who's fallen to dust. Yet you always hold your head high in front of me. Why can't you learn from others? Lower your posture a bit. Maybe then I would genuinely be willing to marry you. After Kamala Hayes' words, everyone gasped. Brandon Davis' fluctuating expression was quite a sight, but I only felt absurdity. This circle didn't often see such muddled affairs. The Hayes family's reputation had certainly been dragged through the mud by Kamala Hayes and her young boyfriend. Do I need to lower my posture in front of you? Kamala Hayes, you really think highly of yourself. I stood there, looking up at her in the posture Kamala Hayes hated the most. I had no interest in continuing this charade, but I also knew that I couldn't leave this place on my own. My brows twitched, a mix of helplessness and annoyance. As I turned and stared at the furthest corner of the crowd, a group of people ganging up on one person, isn't that a bit much? A clear, pleasant female voice suddenly rang out as if from the heavens, and a woman emerged from the far corner of the room. Her charming, slightly upturned eyes held a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Ms. Vance. Kamala Hayes looked at the woman who had suddenly appeared, her eyes wide with shock, her words slightly stuttering. She bowed in greeting. Audrey Vance didn't even glance at her, walking directly towards me. Everyone in the hall exchanged glances, not daring to even breathe, simply because the woman standing before them was Audrey Vance, the granddaughter of the Vance family in Sterling Harbor, the woman who, upon returning to the country, had caused a storm in Sterling Harbor. She had reorganized all of the Vance family's businesses, shedding numerous family branches to establish a foothold in smart technology. Single-handedly, she had shifted Sterling Harbor's economic landscape, expanding the Vance family's fortune. Now, the Vance family was second only to the prominent Sterling family. Countless influential families desired to forge connections with the Vance family, but the Vances were as impenetrable as a fortress, allowing no one close. Yet here was such a woman, standing before a country bumpkin. Ethy, finally decided to ask your sister for help. Audrey Vance's radiant, captivating face broke into a playful smile, as she linked her arm through mine. I rolled my eyes. Audrey Vance, are you enjoying the show? I'm already considering having someone dig out your eyes and feed them to the dogs. I gritted my teeth and warned her, then casually pinched her waist. Still not satisfied, I lightly squeezed her cheek. Kamala Hayes frowned with displeasure at the intimate pair before her, a flicker of surprise mixed with annoyance in her eyes. She couldn't help but interrupt. Father told me you were coming, and I sent a car to pick you up, but couldn't find you. It seems you arrived early. Had I known you were here, I wouldn't have let you see this embarrassing display. Audrey Vance was a formidable presence, whom her father had been trying to get to attend for a year. Half of the reason the Hayes family was hosting this birthday party was to foster ties with the Vance family of Sterling Harbor, and the other half was to announce her engagement to Ethan Sterling. But now, in a moment of distraction, she had ruined half of it. Audrey Vance's appearance had given her a jolt, making her slightly more sober. Audrey Vance ignored Kamala Hayes, firmly grasping my unruly hand and pressing it to my lower back. She leaned in close to my ear. Don't cause a scene if you don't want your identity revealed. I genuinely didn't want my identity known. This was Riverton. If I simply broke off the marriage pact and returned to Sterling Harbor, no one would know that Ethan Sterling had been jilted by a small-time family in Riverton. Unexpectedly, Audrey Vance, my rival, actually understood me quite well. Audrey Vance was 2 years older than me, and had always competed with me for first place in everything since childhood. I was annoyed with her, but also frustrated that I was always just a bit short of her. From childhood to adulthood, our arguments and fights never ceased. When I saw her in the crowd earlier, I knew she was there to watch me make a fool of myself. Ms. Hayes, your former fiancé is quite interesting. I rather like him. Since you've broken off your marriage pact, may I pick up where you left off? Kamala Hayes' face instantly turned pale. Someone actually coveted Ethan Sterling, whom she had deemed unworthy. Ms. Vance, you must be joking. How could Ethan Sterling be worthy of you? We were just having a spat. How could something like a marriage pact be nullified just because I say so? Kamala Hayes was not wrong. Few people in our circle had the right to choose their own spouses. Most marriages were for strategic alliances, and we were merely tools. unable to escape family control or truly be independent, I scoffed, feeling a little contemptuous, but I was a Sterling, and our family no longer needed such trivial alliances for prestige. But why did Kamala Hayes suddenly change her mind? I looked at her, puzzled, only to see her gaze fixed on our clasped hands hidden behind my back. I understood instantly. It was like a dog protecting its bone. Kamala Hayes, I'm not part of your circle. I don't have so many twists and turns. Since I agreed to break off the marriage pact just now, it became invalid at that very moment. I brought my hand out from behind my back. I clasped Audrey Vance's hand, holding my head high with arrogance. Kamala Hayes felt a headache coming on. This turn of events was something she hadn't anticipated, and her hasty agreement to break off the marriage pact had been a moment of recklessness. Now, there was no turning back. Watching the two of us interact so warmly, her heart felt as if something was tearing at it. It was painful and suffocating. She suddenly felt that she didn't want to call off the marriage, but she had been publicly humiliated. Ethan Sterling, stop this. Our marriage is not something we can decide on our own. I apologize for what happened just now, okay? Kamala Hayes finished speaking and reached out to pull me. I stepped back, responding word by word. No. Brandon Davis also felt humiliated. The scene had been so dramatic. It was all because Kamala Hayes had said she wanted to break off the marriage, but now that she was backtracking, it made him look like a clown. Kamala, didn't you say you didn't like being engaged to him? How could you? Brandon Davis prattled on endlessly. Seeing Kamala Hayes' face grow darker and darker, her irritation intensified. She violently shook off Brandon Davis' hand as he tried to take her arm. Brandon Davis, do you think the Hayes family looks down on Ethan Sterling only to favor you? A mere fleeting affair is one thing, but taking it seriously is just pathetic. Kamala Hayes' eyes were filled with malice, and her voice was as cold as ice. Brandon Davis was thoroughly frightened. He had never seen Kamala Hayes like this. For so many years, he had stayed by Kamala Hayes' side without a formal title. He believed he would achieve the best outcome. But now, just a step away from victory, Kamala Hayes' few light words had shattered everything. The people who had spoken up for Brandon Davis earlier also dared not make a sound. After all, Brandon Davis, without Kamala Hayes, was nothing more than an insignificant figure from a minor family. The world of fame and fortune truly saw a sudden shift in alliances. I watched the scene transform in just half an hour. I felt like laughing, yet I couldn't. Ethan Sterling, don't bother Ms. Vance anymore. Come here. The birthday party is about to begin. When father arrives, he'll say we went too far. Kamala Hayes acted as if nothing had happened, and walked towards me. I frowned, standing behind Audrey Vance. Audrey Vance timely blocked Kamala Hayes. He said no, didn't you hear him? Or are you, Ms. Hayes, overestimating yourself, insisting on taking my person from me? In that case, you might want to consider how many Hayes families it will cost you. The scene was like a battleground, making people lose the courage to continue watching. Kamala Hayes clenched her fists, her expression impatient. Ms. Vance, he is my fiancé. Are you implying that the esteemed Vance family intends to lord it over Riverton? Audrey Vance let out a few cold laughs, looking at the woman who was far from composed, then turned to me. Ethan Sterling, is this the woman you absolutely had to marry back then? If you ask me, your taste is truly terrible. Hearing her incredibly sarcastic words, I wanted to punch Audrey Vance. Her biting wit could be lethal, even if she just licked herself. Ethan Sterling, do you really think she wants you? She just finds you new and exciting for now. After a while, she won't want you anymore. Ethan Sterling, I'll give you one more chance. As long as you come over here, I'll pretend everything that happened today never occurred. Hearing this, I even thought that I was the one who had caused trouble by not knowing any better today. Give me another chance. I stepped out from behind Audrey Vance, looking at Kamala Hayes with a sneer. Before, I only thought she was beautiful, but now she seemed like just an ordinary woman. She was even less appealing than my rival, Audrey Vance. I'll say it again, you were the one who said to break off the marriage. Since it's broken, it's null and void. The marriage pact is shattered, the ceremonial ink destroyed. There's no possibility between us anymore. No sooner had I spoken than a commotion erupted outside the door. I checked the time. The birthday party was starting, and the Hayes family elders were about to enter. It seemed this matter truly couldn't be avoided. I dropped my gaze in frustration, looking at the mess on the floor, feeling annoyed. A group of people walked in from outside, chatting and laughing. Leading them was Mr. Hayes, Kamala Hayes' father, he didn't even have time to greet me or Audrey Vance. When he saw the things on the ground, his eyes widened. What is this? Isn't this your marriage pact with Ethan Sterling? How did this special, artisanal ink reserved for momentous occasions get shattered? Mr. Hayes stared at the scene before him in disbelief, his panic reaching its peak at that moment. Mr. Hayes, my marriage to Kamala Hayes was just nullified. She said she wanted to break off the marriage. Mr. Hayes felt his world come crashing down. He turned and slapped Kamala Hayes. You disgraceful girl. What have you done? Do you know the Sterling family's standing? We barely managed to elevate ourselves to this position. And you've ruined everything. His furious voice filled the entire hall. Kamala Hayes' mind went blank, her reaction slow. The Sterling family. Which Sterling family? People in the crowd began to whisper, their gazes at me no longer mocking. More than that, it was a look of fear. How many Sterling families are there in this world? Of course, it's the Sterling Harbor Sterling family. Audrey Vance, standing beside me, spoke up. The Sterling family has long been a pillar of industry and governance. Haven't any of you heard? The Sterling family had been rooted in Sterling Harbor since ancient times, a prominent family from their ancestors, remaining a leader among influential families even in times of decline. Their businesses spanned the globe, and their extended network of affiliates and descendants was vast, and Ethan Sterling was the sole heir, holding the highest rank in the Sterling ancestral lineage. It was just that due to a childhood incident, he had rarely appeared in public. Dad, he's from the Sterling Harbor Sterling family. But when he delivered the marriage pact 10 years ago, he clearly came from the countryside. For so many years, he never mentioned being from the Sterling Harbor Sterling family. Could there be a mistake? Kamala Hayes still felt there was a misunderstanding and rushed forward, clutching her face. Yes, Mr. Hayes. How could he be the young master of the Sterling Harbor Sterling family? He's just a poor country boy. Mr. Hayes listened to the words, feeling as if all the blood in his brain was rushing backward. And where did you come from? This place has no room for someone like you. Asterisk smack. Asterisk he slapped Brandon Davis, one on each side, perfectly symmetrical. The plan he had painstakingly laid for over 10 years was effortlessly ruined by this foolish son. Idiot. Who told you to bring this man in? I've spoiled you rotten all these years. If he were just a country boy, how could he have entered the Hayes family's inner circle? All your expenses for food, clothing, and other needs all these years were sent from Sterling Harbor. Do you think our Hayes family alone could have arranged this birthday party for you at the opulent Azure Sky estate? Kamala Hayes stood frozen in place. After the marriage alliance, all her clothes, cars, and even some food were sourced from Sterling Harbor. At the time, she only thought her father did it to maintain appearances, but now it seemed that everything indeed began after Ethan Sterling appeared. Even this birthday party. Ethan Sterling had once asked her about it. At that time, she had blurted out that she wanted to hold it at the Azure Sky estate, and before that, she had never even set foot in the place. Kamala Hayes stiffly turned, her bloodshot eyes filled with regret. She looked at me, her voice bitter. Ethan Sterling, why did you hide it from me? I just didn't like your cold arrogance. I truly wanted to marry you. If you had told me earlier, none of this would have happened. Kamala Hayes was in agony, her voice trembling. Kamala Hayes, I gave you many chances and reminded you many times. I asked you if you wanted to move to Sterling Harbor with me, and I asked you where you wanted to hold your birthday party. Whatever you wanted, wasn't it always in your hands the very next day? Today, you insisted on breaking off the marriage. How is that my fault? Mr. Hayes knew there was no room for negotiation. He bent down, picked up the scattered items on the ground, and presented them to me with both hands. I accepted them, saying thank you. Let everyone here be a witness today. My marriage pact with the Hayes family is hereby nullified. As I walked out of the Hayes family's birthday party, I felt completely refreshed. Behind me, the opulent Azure Sky estate had its lights extinguished the moment I walked out. The Hayes family would never again step foot in that place for their events, going back to Sterling Harbor. Audrey Vance eagerly followed behind me, approaching me as if presenting a treasure. Kamala Hayes walked out with her father, and immediately saw Audrey Vance's fawning manner. Mr. Hayes felt 100 kinds of vexation in his heart, yet he was unwilling to accept it. You don't remember anything about what happened when you were 9. Kamala Hayes replayed memories in her mind again and again, until finally, in a certain moment, she remembered that small country town. Dad, There's still hope for this. After the marriage in Riverton fell through, I found an excuse and returned to Sterling Harbour. As soon as I landed in Sterling Harbour, many invitations for meetings arrived at my home. I rejected them all, but there was one persistently Klingon person whom I couldn't shake off. Why are you like a persistent Klingon, sticking to me every day? I was arranging his custom writing desk, having only written half a character. Audrey Vance climbed in through the window, smiling shamelessly at me. Ethan Sterling, you should be secretly thrilled. Who else in all of Sterling Harbour is worth me caring about this much? Audrey Vance amused me. Audrey Vance was indeed a highly sought-after marriage prospect. Though she had been decisive and forceful in recent years, most of the timid cowards only watched from afar, not daring to approach her. But there wasn't a single family that didn't want their sons to marry a Vance woman. What about me makes me worth caring about to you? Before Audrey Vance went abroad, she had confessed her feelings to me. I thought it was just a youthful infatuation that would disappear in a month or so, and I also had the marriage pact with Kamala Hayes, so I didn't pay her much mind. After I rejected her, she left dejectedly. For 3 to 5 years, she didn't contact me, only sending a modest gift during holidays. If it weren't for the drama in Riverton last time, I would have almost forgotten about her. Everything about you makes you worth caring about to me. Audrey Vance suddenly leaned closer to me, nose to nose, her beautiful, charming eyes sparkling. My hand froze in midair, and the ink from my brush dripped onto the expensive fine parchment. Audrey Vance, you are too close to me. I wanted to dodge, but I also didn't. But Audrey Vance pressed harder, her warm body moving closer. At such close proximity, all I could hear was the beat of our hearts, one soft, one strong, like a symphony. The next second, her soft lips pressed against mine, my eyes widened, and a tingling sensation spread through my entire body. My hands instinctively braced against the desk, my palms covered in sticky ink. With a flip, I regained the upper hand and deepened the kiss. Her kiss, like her, was passionate and forceful, giving me no room to breathe. Even our kiss was a competition, and of course, I wasn't going to back down. I don't know how long it lasted, but she eventually collapsed, limp in my arms. Her cheeks were flushed, and she was panting. See? You even lose to me when we kiss. Annoyed, she raised her hand to hit me, but I caught her fist. Audrey Vance, I'll marry you. Audrey Vance was somewhat shocked, and her eyes instantly reddened. Then I'll block those dirty outsiders for you, and give you a home, okay? A home. Audrey Vance knew exactly what I wanted. A simple sentence was enough to persuade me. I nodded, and the marriage was settled. But a few days later, I saw an uninvited guest at my home. When I saw Kamala Hayes, I thought I was hallucinating. She held a bouquet of my favorite hyacinths, standing downstairs, and the first thing she said was, "Ethy." The days I spent with Kamala Hayes in that small country town were the happiest times of my life. Back then, she gave me that nickname and followed me around every day, calling me by it. Over time, I grew to accept the nickname. On the day I went to present the marriage pact, when I was 18, I thought she would call me that name, but she didn't, nor did she in the 10 years that followed. Until now, she remembered it again. "Ethy, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have forgotten you. Look, I brought you your favorite hyacinths. Will you forgive me?" Kamala Hayes looked at me, her eyes filled with deep affection. It was the kind of profound love that had been there for a long time, perhaps even as much as Audrey Vance's. Yet, I could sense a performative element to it. I knew perfectly well that her purpose for coming today was to plead with me to reconsider, to give the Hayes family another chance. The Hayes family's current situation was far from good. News of the broken engagement with the Sterling family had spread like wildfire, causing all their collaborations to halt. "I am sorry, but I am already engaged." I raised my hand, and the matching ring on my right index finger sparkled. Speaking of which, I had to thank Audrey Vance for insisting we buy matching rings. She wanted everyone to know I was taken. Kamala Hayes frowned and shook her head, expressing deep skepticism. "How is that possible? You've only been back to Sterling Harbour for 10 days from Riverton, and you're already engaged. Why hasn't any news of this spread?" I found it hard to understand how the once clever Kamala Hayes had managed to make the Hayes family seem so naive and oblivious, but I didn't want to waste words. As the saying goes, never argue with a fool, and the person standing before me was nothing short of one. If I don't want news to spread in Sterling Harbour, no one will dare to spread it. Otherwise, how could you have gone all these years without knowing I was part of the Sterling family? Kamala Hayes' face fell. clearly embarrassed. She was about to speak when Audrey Vance suddenly appeared behind her, interrupting her. Well, if it isn't Riverton's disgraced stray, come to Sterling Harbor looking for scraps. Audrey Vance's sharp tongue was truly more potent than mine. I sighed, feeling a bit awkward. Her words were truly quite embarrassing. Audrey Vance walked over to me, taking my hand. Ms. Hayes, he is truly my fiancé now. You should hurry back to Riverton and see what a mess the Hayes family is in. Oh, and the Davis family, too. What a mess that was. Kamala Hayes' face went white, her look of panic and defeat almost comical. What have you done? Audrey Vance lowered her gaze, dropping her casual demeanor. The moment you left Riverton, I ordered everyone to cease all cooperation with the Hayes family, even their loans were stopped. And as for the Davis family's minor business, which I wouldn't even deign to look at, I took care of that too. As a bonus, this is the price you pay for coming to Sterling Harbor to find him. Kamala Hayes certainly knew what stopping their loans meant for the Hayes family. This was tantamount to severing the Hayes family's lifeline. Within a day, debt collectors would be breaking down the Hayes family's doors. Kamala Hayes' face was solemn as she turned and left, the hyacinth bouquet she held falling to the ground in a flash. Audrey Vance snatched it from the air. The next second, she held it up to me. Here is an offering, my fiancé. I couldn't help but laugh out loud, taking the hyacinth bouquet from her. Before she could react, I leaned in and kissed her lips. As I went upstairs, Audrey Vance remained there, like a dazed goose, looking at Audrey Vance, who had been by my side for over 2 decades. I suddenly realized how much I had missed. In all the years I spent searching elsewhere, perhaps Audrey Vance was the only one who stood steadfastly by me. But that's how people are. We often take for granted what's easily within our reach. I was so glad it wasn't too late when I saw Audrey Vance again. Later, Audrey Vance and I got engaged, married, and eventually had children. I never heard any news of the Hayes family again. It was as if that family had never existed, and I had never left Sterling Harbor. Under the quiet night sky, having her by my side, I felt a truly profound happiness. Audrey Vance, have I ever told you I love you? Audrey Vance looked puzzled. I looked into her eyes and told her, solemnly, Audrey Vance, I love you, and I will love you just as you've loved me.